first of all, I wanted to ask you about your reaction to seeing the film today, because you were in the audience.
Yes, I saw most of it. I haven't seen the film for about 20 years, so it was very interesting to watch it again, and it all came back to me quite vividly because I was on the set quite a lot of the time. Yeah, I was very happy with the film when it first was finished, and I'm still happy with it, so it's good.
Fantastic. So I will ask a question that I will repeat for Agnieszka Holland, but I think it's, I told you when we've met 5 minutes ago that I saw the film for the first time in 1996 as a 17-year-old, in love with Rimbaud and in love with Leonardo DiCaprio, of course. And the film stayed with me, and I had an euphoric reaction to it back then, and I had an euphoric reaction to it 25 years later when I saw it for the second time on big screen. And I think that Rimbaud is like timeless, intergenerational inspiration and fascination. So I wanted to ask you a more general question now about your fascination with this great poet and great rebel.
Well, it started very, very young. I was studying French at high school, and my French teacher introduced me to Rimbaud, and I was immediately very taken with his work. And then I was even more interested when I found out that he had started to write when he was 16 and stopped to write when he was 19, and then never wrote again. And was always very angry when anyone asked him whether he was a writer later in his life. So I was very, very fascinated by him, and I wanted to write about him from that early age. About 5 years later, I had a year away from university where I was studying languages, and I went to Paris and did a series of jobs. And while I was in Paris, I was able to research the background a bit more at the Bibliothèque Nationale, which was a little bit more relaxed then about who was allowed to read things there. So I researched and researched, and then I wrote the play in 1967, and it was done first in London at the Royal Court Theatre in 1968, where it was a complete disaster.
Why?
Well, the critics hated it, and said things that some of the critics said when the film came out. They didn't want to believe that great writers were like this, and they also, a lot of them said, well, why is there nothing about their work? Why do we never see them, discussing their work?
Why don't they recite their poems all the time, right?
Exactly. Mm-hmm. But in fact, there is quite, and I was realizing today as I watched it, there is quite a lot about their work. In fact, it's just that, I don't know, it offended people, the play, and I think the film initially did as well, but slowly it began to have a reputation, and it began to be performed more often, and it was the same with the film. I think the film began to gather a reputation, which it deserves.
Yeah, definitely. Jest pani Agnieszka. Książka jest. Proszę państwa, to jeszcze raz wielkie oklaski. Agnieszka Holland.
It was staged because we just had the lunch together. So.
But I'm very glad that we got to see this embrace on stage. I've just asked Christopher Hampton about this timeless fascination with the rebel and poet Rimbaud, which is intergenerational, but also I think for your generation, you're both from the same generation, it's especially important to read Rimbaud. It was especially important. And when I read about Jim Morrison's fascination with Rimbaud or Patti Smith's fascination with Rimbaud, and I wanted to ask you also, Pani Agnieszko, I will call you that in Polish, about your approach to this fantastic poet and character.
Well, Christopher wrote the play, which was the base for the screenplay, when he was 21. And when I was 21, studying in Prague, in the film school, Rimbaud was for me, together with some other great poets or writers, like Franz Kafka, for example, he was for me like very important person. It means I somehow I projected myself into that rebel poet, and when finally I became the director of that film, I realized that when I was 21, I was some kind of Arthur Rimbaud, and when I was shooting that film, I was rather Paul Verlaine. Mm-hmm. So
this is exactly right. This is what happened to me. When I wrote the play, I was halfway between the age of Rimbaud and the age of Verlaine, and I began as Rimbaud.
Now, again?
Unfortunately, I finished as Verlaine.
Yeah, I heard about it. It means that I wasn't the first director for the script. The first director was Volker Schlendorf, and I read in the trades that he is preparing that movie and that it's casted already. It's supposed to be River Phoenix to play Rimbaud, and John Malkovich to play Verlaine. And I was very, very jealous. It means I thought, well, this is such a perfect script, such a perfect cast. And in that time I met River Phoenix because we had the project together, and we became very quickly friends, like for 2-3 weeks, and after he was dead. So I think that project somehow fell apart after his death, or I don't know what was the reason why Volker
Yes, Volker quit because he had a great friendship with Malkovich, and Malkovich would not do the film because he had a great friendship with River Phoenix, and he felt too upset to do the film without River Phoenix, and then Volker didn't really want to do it with neither of them. And so it's very understandable that's how it happened.
But you know, actually after I got involved, we approached Malkovich, and he was eager to do it for a while.
Actors, eh?
Yeah. And then I had the idea of Leonardo DiCaprio, who was like rising star, but still not so well known, even if he had already Oscar nomination, I think, for
What's Eating?
Gilbert Grape.
Gilbert Grape, which I've seen, and I found that young boy absolutely fantastic. And then I didn't know how to convince him, and I was living in LA all the time in that time, and I remember exactly, I was walking on Wilshire Boulevard, and it was a bookshop, famous bookshop Rizzoli, and they produced the series of the literary T-shirts. And on one T-shirt was a drawing of Arthur Rimbaud, which looked exactly like Leonardo DiCaprio. And it was pretty cheap. It costed, I don't know, $12 maybe. So I bought that T-shirt and sent to his agent. And actually it worked.
And also his father was, I read that his father was a very great admirer of Rimbaud.
Yeah, he was a great fan of poet, jak się mówi, przeklęci poeci?
Poemodie? In English,
and
I don't
he
know.
actually, as an editor of a little underground edition house, he edited, he published the book about absinthe, where one of the great heroes have been Verlaine, Rimbaud, and Van Gogh, and Gauguin, etc.
Since we are at Script Fiesta Festival, I wanted to ask you, Christopher, about the process of rewriting the play that you revisited a few times before, and there was the TV adaptation, was it? And rewriting it for a big screen, for a film script.
Yes, I had already revised the play. It was put on again about 10 years later. Was more successful, and then I was very aware that there were possibilities in the cinema that I didn't have in the theatre, so that we could see Africa, we could see more of the life of the street, we could see London at that time, and so I guess I kind of broke the play up and put it back together again with some new scenes, and I think maybe we worked together a little bit on the script, and I think the film is very different from the play in the end. There are characters like his family, Rambo's family, which don't appear in the stage play.
And you said somewhere that
I have to say that Christopher was a great collaborator, especially that he was already very established and successful screenplay and screenwriter. Oscar winner, I think, already.
Maybe.
Yeah. And in the same time, he started as a director. He prepared in the same time. You shot in the same time.
Same year, yes.
Yeah. His film debut, he wrote, of course, Carrington, very successful film. And regardless, he was extremely humble and collaborative, and means he accepted that he's somehow responding to my needs and opinions, and it was a wonderful collaboration, screenwriter, director. I hope that I've been respectful to you as well.
Yes, no, I had a very happy time on the film. I remember it very fondly, and I enjoyed all the work that we did on it, and when I was there a bit during the shooting, I enjoyed that as well.
When it comes to this creative process, on you discussing the script, could you share more insight on the maybe changes or what Pani Agnieszka got to convince you to change? Maybe do you have any memories of this kind of process?
I think the script that I wrote first was more complicated, and there was more changing from flashbacks to the old Verlaine back again, and your instinct was always to simplify it, and so now we just have old Verlaine at the beginning and at the end, and it doesn't move around in time. I think it was probably a little too elaborate, the first screenplay.
Actually,
that I wrote.
I think I shot more of that, but
Yeah,
after
I think
the editing process,
That's
yeah,
right.
it just didn't work.
Yeah.
And also the makeup was very difficult. It took a long time, and the makeup artists who say that they are able to do the bald head, they've been lying, because after 1 hour of work, that bald
the head of David
started
Hewlett, right?
To depress, and so I remember that I was very unpleasant and even violent with one of those makeup artists.
I didn't see any of that.
No, fortunately. But it wasn't the reason, of course, only reason. But by the end, we realized that back and forth is like breaking some kind of the tension and emotional connection to the story and to the characters. And anyway, the first editing of that film was one of the worst first edit I had in my entire life. It means I was really depressed. I thought that it was never gonna work. So it was painful experience, but very useful experience, because after the process became very, somehow creative in the editing time.
I've read somewhere that there were more African scenes, and the story in Africa was more elaborated in the script.
I believe you went to Djibouti, didn't you?
Yeah.
And it rained for the first time. It rained for the first time in 10 years or something.
Yeah, it was tricky. Yeah, but we had more of the scenes, African scenes, and it was actually the distributors, American distributors, who wanted less, or maybe French distributor wanted less. And I think that was finally two versions. That one was longer.
Oh, is that right? I didn't know that.
Yeah, I think so.
So I wanted to go back to the casting process. You've said that John Malkovich and the late River Phoenix were the first choices for the roles of Verlaine and Rimbaud, and then, of course, the River Phoenix died, and another actor of the generation had to be chosen to play Rimbaud, and fortunately, you had Leonardo DiCaprio, but you needed to find Verlaine. So could you tell us more about casting process of David Thewlis and their work together and your work together? Because we were talking with Mr. Hampton before we went on stage, and yeah, DiCaprio's performance here is absolutely powerful and fantastic, and it's even more powerful, I think, because we know what happened next. His career blossomed.
Yeah, I wanted very much, the John Malkovich play Verlaine. Also, not only because he was and is a great actor, but also because he is physically so close to Verlaine that it was like, predicted that he will be Verlaine. And he, as I said yes, and after he said no, and I thought that maybe his agent, who was Tracy, you remember Tracy? Yeah.
That Tracy.
She convinced him that it's not a good idea for him. And it was also, I think, because of he wasn't sure if that unknown young, beautiful actor will not overshine him. So,
like
anyway,
he did with Johnny Depp in What's Eating Gilbert Grape.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
We lost John, and I don't remember exactly how many ideas we have who could replace him. And David Thewlis came as a great opportunity, and it was not long time after he did his absolutely wonderful film with absolutely wonderful role, Mike Lee Naked, which I adored. It's my favorite Mike's film and one of my favorite films. And it was very good, I think, because David, I don't know, I haven't seen him for a long time, but he was extremely generous man and very generous actor, and he was helping enormously the young actors, Leonardo and Roman Boranger, who played his wife, to feel secure and to feel, to give all the freedom when playing the difficult scenes. For Leonardo, very young man, very young boy, he was like 20, but he was still very teenage somehow, to play the homosexual scenes in that time when it was very rare. I think that it was very courageous, but at the same time it was very difficult, and he was afraid that the image can glue to him and that the people will think that whatever. Anyway, it was difficult. And David was extremely helpful, and also for Roman, who had the problem with being naked and having the sex scenes. David was like, what today you have the coordinator. So David was our coordinator for the sex scenes. But he was also the great part. And I had that idea that we can try together something which I called Polish makeup. Polish makeup meant that when you are playing drunk, you are really drinking the alcohol during the scene. And that idea came from the experience of Krzysztof Kieślowski's film Spokój, the Calm, where Jurek Sztur had this scene when he's drinking, he's playing the young worker who was released from the prison, and he's drinking with his new comrades from the work, and he wants like to, you know, to pay them some, to attract them by like drinking a lot of vodka with them. And in one take, he drank, I think, 6 or 7 glasses of vodka. And it was absolutely fascinating to see Stur after one glass, after 2 glasses, after 3 glasses, and the way he changed, you know, his look and his speech and everything was just fantastic. I convinced Leonardo and David to do the same.
Was it absent?
Except that when Krzysztof was shooting film Spokój, we had very, very little of the footage to shoot on. So we practically did one take always. And when I shot Total Eclipse, the footage was not the problem because it was, you know, it was in France. So we shot like sometimes 5, sometimes 10 takes. And I didn't realize how drunk they will be after the 3rd take. So I had to stop in some point. Because David, you watched the film now, right?
Yes.
So it's the scene where David, it means Verlaine, drunk, comes to the bedroom of his wife and where the newborn baby is, and he's totally drunk. So he was totally drunk. David Tulis was totally drunk when playing that scene. And actually, in the middle of the shot, he fell down on the floor, and we had to reanimate him. So that was the last day of Polish makeup.
I don't know if you knew about this, but there was some intervention from other directors at one point. Werner Herzog. Do you know about this?
No, I didn't know.
He wanted to do it, and I didn't know him, but he contacted I guess Jean-Pierre Ramsay, the producer, and he said, "Look, I will take Leonardo DiCaprio, and I will go to the Congo for 6 months, and we will live in the jungle, and then he will understand what it's like to be a poet who has no borders and no limits." And so I think we wrote back and said, "Dear Werner, thank you very much."
Well, but that was maybe a great idea, you know. He could do the sequel.
I don't think Leonardo would have ever done it.
It would be a combination
Leonardo,
of...
it was the last moment for him to do the adventure like that, right?
Yeah, it would be a combination of Joseph Conrad and Rimbaud. I would just like to stay a bit more with the subject of casting and Leonardo DiCaprio. How was it to work with him at this very young age? But he was already accomplished, Oscar nominated for What's Eating Gilbert Grape. He had fantastic roles like Basketball Diaries and the film with Robert De Niro. So could you tell us more about this, working with this very young actor and very talented actor?
Actually, it was great. It means he was a great kid. And that mix of, he was very childish somehow, you know, and because he felt lonely in France, he let 2 boyfriends come to be with him, which was a nightmare for the production. One, it was certain Jonah, and second one, it was Tobey Maguire, before Tobey
Before he became
yes.
Spider-Man, yes.
Yeah, anyway, it was managed them, and it was difficult for the production and for the catering. Because the catering, you know, having like American actors and so, and French catering mostly is very good, and that was exceptional. And the cook wanted really to please them and to do the best. And they always sent the food he prepared back, and they wanted spaghetti with the meatballs and mushrooms, which for any European chef, it's the
Abomination.
Abomination, right? So anyway, it was like he was a little like that, and in the same time he was extremely mature in his emotional imagination. So mostly first take he offered was surprisingly wonderful. And also we've been doing, it was pretty playful, the shooting. I had the idea, to ask Leonardo what kind of special skills he has. Special skills when the actor, young actor especially, is like writing to the agents, my special skills. I am swimming and, horse ride and whatever. So I asked Leonardo what are his really special skills. And he had two, which I used. One, it was that you take the saliva down and after you take it back to the mouth. And he does three, actually. And he does it in the first lunch with Verlaine's wife family. And also he knew how to, what is,
burp.
Yeah. So he did that also very skillfully. And he also knew one trick to open the bottle of wine, cork, to take the cork out with the yes. So you can see all his skills in that film.
Very skillful actor.
Also, I was on the set a bit watching him, and he would, if he did 4 or 5 takes, I was very impressed by the fact that he would always do something different from one take to the next, and all the takes would be interesting. So I guess it would have been quite hard for the editor to choose which one, because he was always. I was very, very impressed with him. I thought he was an incredible,
me too. I
incredible
thought that he's
actor.
a genius. Yeah. Mm.
Did you ever have any ideas of changing the language? Because I've read, for us, outside of the English language world, it's not that apparent that David Thewlis is speaking with another accent and Leonardo DiCaprio has his American accent and Romain Berenger and French actors have different accents. Was it ever an issue for you?
I think
during
it was
the
a
production?
problem to the audience and critics in English-speaking countries, and for French-speaking, for French, it was the problem that the French poets speak English regardless of the accent, because of the
I imagine if we made a film like this today, we might well make it in French. It would seem a logical thing to do, to make a film about French poets in French, but it was a different time.
Yeah, and also, frankly, I will never find in France the actor like Leonardo to play Rimbaud. It will be totally different film from that point of view.
That's for sure. Ladies and gentlemen, let's start the Q&A session. Ja może jeszcze powiem po polsku, gdyby ktoś z Państwa chciał zadać pytanie po polsku, to można, oczywiście będzie tłumaczenie dla pana Christophera. Here we have first question here in the first row.
Hello, it's a pleasure to be here and ask some question. I don't know if you know, but today we had a partial eclipse of the sun. And so I want to ask about the title, because I feel like this title is so beautiful and said so much, but not reveal too much. And I want to ask, was there any other option of this title? What was the story, and what I feel like it's for Christopher ask a question, and what this title meant to you in context of this story?
Well, I was in one of Rimbaud's poems. He talks about he calls the two of them les fils du soleil, the sons of the sun. Which doesn't sound very good in English, but I was thinking about that, about the way they both, in different ways, kind of worshipped the sun, those two writers. And I suppose I was thinking that what happened to Rimbaud was by his own choice. He just stopped after a very short period of time. So it seemed to me that, for me, total eclipse means the end of the darkness that followed his 3 years of writing, I guess.
Thank you.
I also like
don't
the-
know, you know, because you chose that title way before we met.
Yeah. It's true.
I've got a question because Pani Agnieszka mentioned that the editing process was very difficult. So was it somehow connected to the script, or it was something different? And what have you learned? Because you mentioned that you learn a lot from that experience. Thank you very much.
Well, certainly it is somehow connected to the script, but it also is connected to the way I shot it, and some things which we imagined have been different when they've been on the screen, which mostly happens, but some storytelling is somehow more definitive, and in that storytelling it was a lot of associations and, you know, and the connections which been not like easy connections, not like conventional storytelling connections. It's why it was also possible to play with that. I don't remember exactly.
Well, I
yeah.
think what in Saison en Enfer, the poem by Rimbaud, is in 8 sections. And when I first wrote the screenplay, I wrote it in 8 sections, and I called each section the name that he had called each section of his poem. And I think this was probably too complicated an idea. And it meant that the story was not really told in continuity. And I think as it's quite a difficult story for people to swallow anyway, it's probably a story that is best told in continuity. And I think maybe the first idea of the script was a little bit too fancy.
I remember you saying somewhere that there was a very particular scene between Rimbaud and his mother that you, I forgot the English word, that you wanted to see, and that it wasn't in the final.
Well, the family, especially his mother, were not in the play, and they were. But I think that I didn't want to psychologize at all. But I think a lot of the darkness in Rimbaud came from his relationship with his mother, who he called la bouche d'ombre, the mouth of shadow, and I think there was a scene. I don't think it stayed in the film, but there was a scene where, when he was being operated on in hospital, having his leg amputated, he reached out for his mother, and she wouldn't take his hand.
Well, was the scene when he was operated, which I cut out because it was too graphic for, you know. But if his mother is there, no, I don't think so.
I think there was a moment in the script where I wanted to show the. You have it really at the end when he leaves and she watches him, and then her face
and you
is
know,
very
and
hard.
it was something magical because we've been shooting it in front of that farm.
Yeah.
And it was the road when he's going away with the carriage, and on the side have been the horses, which been the real horses, you know, not we didn't put them there; they've been just in that location. And in the moment when he passes, the horses started to run toward him, like telling him goodbye. It was quite magical.
Yes.
So you know, it was a lot of like magical moments during the shooting, and actually I liked his family.
Yes.
Yeah.
It's a pleasure to meet you both. I have two questions for Christopher. One is, you said you were on the set quite a lot, and is that something you usually do with other films? And what is your involvement with filmmaking then, if any? That's one question. And the second is, I just noticed in the credits that you had a part. You were the judge and I'm wondering how did that happen?
I think it was the idea of Leonardo DiCaprio, but it was my first and last acting role.
You've been very good, you know. I wanted even extend the role.
I do like to be on the set, but I'm sensitive to whether the director wants me to be there or not, because sometimes directors prefer not to have the writer on the set. So if that's the case, I stay away. But in other cases, Stephen Frears, for example, has it in his contract that the writer must be on the set all the time. So I've done now 4 films with him, so I'm used to being on the set. And actually, you can change things sometimes if there's a problem. So it's not just watching, but also from my point of view, just watching is very. When I came to finally direct a film myself, I had quite a lot of experience of watching films being made. So that was a help.
I have a question about the humor, because exactly like Kasia, I was obsessed about this movie when I was a teenager, and then I haven't seen it for years and years, and now, and it's always very interesting when we rediscovering the movies that we were obsessed as a teenagers, because they're always very, very different. And today I realized that what I didn't get when I was very pretentious, very self-serious 16-year-old. It's a very funny movie. It's hilarious. The performances are hilarious, and it's really, really funny. It's very serious, but it's also very funny at the same time. So I wanted to ask about the humor both in the text and then in working with actors.
Well, I'm glad you think so, because I like to make audiences laugh sometimes, and this is a very serious and indeed in some ways tragic film. So in a sense, you want to have something to lighten that oppressive gloom of the subject. And yeah, I think the actors understood that and delivered.
Yeah, we try to. It means we try to establish this kind of playfulness I was a little talking about. And for example, the sequence when they are on the road together, that little road movie sequence, and we invented a lot of things what they are doing, which have been funny and a bit like in the student films, some kind of the recession. And I think for them it was really great to have some kind of the lightness. And some scenes have been some paradoxes of the situations also we started to show in the way, which is actually maybe not funny, but ironic. So yeah, it was conscious, and those 2 actors helped it enormously because they needed it somehow.
So you've made this film 30 years ago, and from that time the world has changed. You have changed your point of view, probably too. So I would like to ask if you got the opportunity to tell this story today. Would you do it, and what you would change? You have told about changing the language, but what else?
I'm not doing the revisions of my film in that way. It is what it is. It's connected to that stage of my life and to the time. And some of the film, that film, I think it's more relevant now than it was in that time. Actually, it's easier to receive that film today for what it is. And when we shown the film for the first time, when we premiered the film, it was so against all the expectations the people have that actually it was quite badly received. And it started to grow like a little undergroundly over the years. The life of film is like a life of person, It can die childhood. It can die old, and it can maybe never die. So it's not up to me after to make the changes. I never had the idea to revisit my film, or recut my film, or something like that.
It's true that it was badly received at the time, but I don't know if you remember this. We were in Telluride. And
I will never forget it. It was.
We had a difficult first screening, but I don't know if you. I don't think you were there. I went to a second screening later on in the in one of the small cinemas, and at the end of the film there was some applause, not a lot of applause, and people began to go, but there was somebody sitting in the middle of the stalls who was applauding and cheering and shouting, and slowly the audience went, and there was just this guy who loved it, obviously absolutely loved it. And I looked over the balcony down, and it was John Schlesinger. Mm-hmm. And it was after that I felt so good about that. I felt nothing could go wrong with the film after that.
Well, yeah, it was some fans and some, I think, good fans of that film. But I remember our first screening. It was when you, for the first time, watched the ready film, the film which was totally finished. And I was sitting next to you, and it was in Telluride Film Festival, which is a very fancy festival, somehow. In the big room, it was under the tent, but it was huge, I don't know, 2,000 people, something like that. And I was sitting next to Christopher, and for me what was the most important is what Christopher thinks about our child. And he was pleased, you've been pleased, and he hugged me, and so I was very happy, but in that moment I suddenly started to feel like the wave of frozen cold coming from the audience. That was, it was the most palpable experience of that kind I ever had in my quite long career. So it was interesting, that happiness that he likes it, and that feeling, wow, that it will be not easy.
I had a wonderful agent, a woman called Margaret Ramsey, who was very important to me when I was young, because she helped me figure out things when I was first in the theatre. And when the play first opened and was denounced by all the critics, and I was very upset because I had written one play before which had been very successful, and I knew this play was better, and yet everybody hated it, it seemed. And she said to me, well, the play is quite original, and the thing about things that are original is that they're also ugly. And audiences don't like things that are ugly until they understand that there's some authenticity in it, and then they accept finally what you're trying to say. And I don't know if that's true or not, but it was very consoling when she said it, and I think there is truth in it.
That was the time when the stories about homosexuality have been rare, and the regular audience had the problems to accept it. On another hand, it was AIDS time, and the homosexual audience started to be more and more important, but they didn't want the complex and ugly vision of their relationship. They wanted something, the regular audience imagined that it would be romantic and beautiful, because it's about poets and French poets, and French poets and French wine and French landscape, everything is beautiful, and suddenly we are throwing into their faces something like that. And gay audience was somehow offended, because they thought that in this time of the AIDS tragedy, they need the positive image of themselves. So it was also political and sociological reason why that film somehow was out of tune.
And the time of anti-heroes had to come already. So our sensibility, our viewers' sensibility, I think, had to catch up, because as we discussed before already, I think Total
Yeah,
Eclipse is a
been
film that gained their audience and the recognition that it deserves through time during this 30 years that we celebrate today.
Right. We've been just like discussing it with Christopher today that when I came to Hollywood in 90s and I was like pitching some ideas or projects I had, mostly I had the response from the studio or executives that the characters are not sympathetic enough. And 10 years later, when I started to come to Hollywood with the pitch, it was that my heroes are too sympathetic. So the change appeared somehow after September 11, I will tell.
I think so, and also the idea of television streamers, series, of course they understood that if they wanted to have a long-running success like The Sopranos or Breaking Bad, to have a negative central character was much more interesting for the audience than...
Well, but it wasn't, a few years before. You had long run of ER, you had long run of West Wing,
Yes.
and people loved it, I think that change was outside of the cinema, not inside.
Yeah, you're probably right.
And about the gay characters, I wanted to just to mention that Brokeback Mountain was the film with Heath Ledger and Jake Gyllenhaal. Brokeback Mountain was a few years after,
I thought
and
it was,
there was also it was also too early for that film. I remember this conversation at, I think it was a press conference in Berlin, in Berlinale, between Heath Ledger and one of the journalists who said awful things about the film because it was about two male characters loving each other. So that's
it was
that's
probably 10
interesting,
years later, no? I don't remember
so it's 10
something
years,
like that.
yeah.
Yeah, that it was crucial 10 years, which actually led us to our years, which are okay.
Let's not dive into this subject right now. Questions?
Hello, thank you for the conversation. I wanted to ask something that was a little bit explored here, because we heard about social view on the movie, about gay community. But for example, I'm very curious how the actor perceived it. What was the preparation, for example, for Leonardo? Because there is a lot of intimacy in this movie, physicality, and I wonder how was it written in the script and then executed, and what was the process, for example, for the actors to work on it. For me, it was very interesting.
I'm not entirely sure that I understood your question correctly, but if it's about the what's in the script to help the actors, is that what you're asking? I think that it's quite detailed, the script, in terms of kind of explaining each scene as we go along. But maybe that's not what you meant.
I think the question was about the how much of the intimacy scenes and the very difficult for young actors scenes were in the script. And
yes, I think they were in the script, but of course they could have been interpreted in other ways. But
yeah, they could be made in much more lyrical way or more elliptic way, and I've been quite don't want to say graphic, but the first sex scene between Rimbaud and Verlaine is quite graphic, and it's not beautiful. It's not lyrical.
yeah.
So, but certainly for Leonardo and for young Roman Boranger, that it was difficult, and for Leonardo especially because he didn't want he had the problem with the fact that he is so ephebic, that he is so
boyish,
sexless
yes,
somehow. And he was working hard on his body to become more fat and more muscular and more ugly. Actually, he killed that beautiful angel he was. He did it in purpose. So it was certainly for him the difficult decision to go with that. And David Thewlis, who acted with him and with Roman in the sex scenes, he's been extremely helpful because he made it everything very cool, very normal, very natural, and gave them the confidence and the feeling that it's just acting, you know, it's fine. My body is something which I use to serve the story. And also it was a question of trust, because I think that they trusted me as well. And Leonardo was very trustful with me. It was, and I felt that responsibility, and I tried to I didn't want to harm him or harm Roman. So it's the question of the, of the relationship between the actors on the stage and the actor's director, and you can really make very difficult things with the actors without attacking their integrity or harming them.
In fact, it was very good to see the scenes being treated in such a forthright way in the film. When the play opened in 1968, there was censorship in the theatre in England, and there were some scenes that were censored. And in fact, when we were doing the previews to the play, the police came every night and stood at the back to make sure that no bounds were overstepped. So we had to be pretty careful when the play was first done.
Proszę Państwa.
Having written the screenplay, I wonder how was the process of changing the screenplay into a script? And you've mentioned before that you've gained a lot, things such as locations. I wonder if you could maybe tell us a little bit more about that, or if there was something that you feel maybe you've lost from the original screenplay.
No, I think what was good for me about, because it was, we're talking about 30 years since the film came out, but it was almost 30 years between writing the play and the film being made. So that although I'd worked a lot on the play during those 30 years and changed it and so on, I really welcomed the fact that we could go places in a film that you can't in the theatre. And I wanted very much for it not to feel like a play that had been turned into a film, but a proper film in its own right. So yeah, it was a pleasure for me to to work on it and to think about how to change it for the screen.
So I would like to ask a follow-up question, just a quick one. You said once that it's harder to turn the theatre play into a film screenplay than to adapt a novel to a screenplay. Could you
I do think that's the case, because I think that the temptation, because the play is already a dramatic form, the danger is that you just adapt it very simply for the screen, and it smells of the theatre. It feels like a theatre piece. Whereas with a novel, for example, a novel is more like a film. It's free. Its form is freer, and also it's unlike the theatre. It's an object. A film is an object. In the end, it's finished, and there it is. Like a book is finished, and there it is. Whereas a stage play is constantly changing and evolving and different every time. So somehow I can't really explain it better than that, except to say that I've found it more difficult to change plays into films, although I've done quite a lot of that, than to adapt novels.
Ladies and gentlemen, we are just approaching the final questions from you. So if there are any more questions from the audience, this is the time.
Okay, I wanted to ask a question which is a bit similar to the previous one. But if, let's say the film didn't happen, and now the idea comes to make this film. We have strange times, People are very sensitive about many things. We have all the trigger warnings before we start watching film on Netflix. And for me, I'm rarely touched by films. I'm touched to the bone with this film, and I'm very happy that I had the opportunity to watch it. But I'm wondering, do you think that nowadays producers would allow this screenplay in this form? And if you think that the changes would be necessary, what changes would you do?
Well, I do think it would be difficult to make this film today, because I think people are very nervous, especially in the area of sexual relations between older people and younger people.
Yeah, that's something that
so
came to my mind.
I think, in a sense, having broken through the bonds of censorship and from the 70s on, the energy of being able to do whatever you wanted to do was released, and it had great results, and the films were much better for it. I think now the atmosphere is a little bit more like it was in the 50s, before that breakthrough, and I think people are tremendously nervous, and that is a restriction on creativity, I think, because it's one of the duties of film and theatre to provoke the audience, to offend the audience, and make them think. And if you're not allowed to do that, if you have to say the right thing all the time and be nice to people all the time, it's not helpful to interesting work, in my view.
Well, but I don't want you to think that it's some kind of the fatum. I think everyone who wants to tell the story in the way which is free has to fight for that. And I just finished the film about Franz Kafka, and I rarely had such a freedom when doing that film, which is kind of experimental, and I'm very happy about it. So it's possible still.
Sure, I'm sure. Yeah. But you have to be, you have to exercise strength, and you have to, especially with pressure from producers, which I think is more heavy on younger artists now.
Oh, I'm not sure. No.
Okay.
Older are not
Good.
very courageous
Great.
neither. No, I think we have to just ask constantly the questions why we are doing that, and for whom, and what is important for me, and if it's possible to do the good creative work without interior freedom. And of course the producers and money people especially, and also institutions, because in Europe it's quite easy to make the film still, but you are depending not only on the producer or streaming platforms, but when you are doing theater film, mostly with the public funds, you are depending on the institutions, which are quite bureaucratic and not very imaginative, and also conformist. And the conformism, it is the sign of today's cinema more and more. You can see it on the Oscars, for example. When, did you watch the Oscars last year?
Yep.
No one said the word about what's going on in their country.
Except the young man who won for the documentary, who spoke about what was happening.
Palestinian-Israeli.
Yes, and as very recently, the Palestinian director of that film has been beaten up and arrested, and so that's why people keep quiet, because it carries a price now, speaking out.
Yes, and the filmmakers asked American Film Academy to write the statement about it, because he won the Oscar. Actually, that team won the Oscar for the best documentary, and the Academy came with some kind of the totally obscure statement without mentioning even his name or the country. And several filmmakers wrote some kind of the protest letter. It happened like in last
Yes,
day.
and now they apologized, the Academy, a couple of days ago.
Yeah, so you know, the fear and the mix of fear and comfort, which we can lose, is deadly combination for the creative things.
And with that, I think we will stay after this fantastic meeting. Thank you so much for sharing your memories from the set and from the process of making Total Eclipse. Agnieszka Holland, Christopher Hampton, thank you so much.